Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiegue, live today on June the 18th on a Tuesday to bring you guys some more storylines coming around the NFL. To start off today, I thought I'd talk more about Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, and Dak Prescott, who will be the next quarterback to get paid. But not only that, which extension will benefit each of these teams the most if one was to get done before the others. Then we're going to talk some more contracts around a running back in Alvin Kamara. He missed the last day of mandatory minicamp, so we're going to get into the reason why, and could this be the final year for Kamara in a New Orleans Saints uniform. Then later on, more contract talks on Cam Hayward entering his final year of his contract, a longtime Steelers player. Could he potentially be on the last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers? He wants to play longer, so something has to give in those negotiations. I'm going to get into it as the show goes along. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, if you have any questions or comments, use the tip and donations link, GSMCpodcast.net. By using this link, I'm able to see your question and comment, and that way get your guys' thoughts or perspective on anything I say or on any of the topics. And also, it's a massive help for this show and this network. So again, if you would, use the tip and donations link, GSMCpodcast.net. But now, in saying that, I can start with the first topic, talking more on these quarterbacks and talking more about the situation on who is going to get the next contract extension. I think it's safe to say, was pretty surprised when Trevor Lawrence, not that he got his extension, but that he is now tied for the highest paid salary in the entire NFL, tied with Joe Burrow at $55 million per year. I was very surprised that he got that based on what he had done and the fact that the Jaguars had so much time, more time than the Packers, than the Cowboys, and the Dolphins have to extend their quarterbacks. I was surprised that the Jaguars got it done ahead of time. I commend them for doing that, but I think they got the price wrong. But regardless of that, now we look forward and to see who will potentially be getting the next contract extension. You look at guys like Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. They've said they've wanted to get it done before training camp. The Dolphins and Tua, I saw some reports saying that they were starting to get into a ballpark of a reasonable contract salary for Tua, so maybe he could be closer than a lot of people expect. And then you have Dak Prescott, who, for me, is probably the furthest for a few reasons. One, I think his situation with the Cowboys, because they have two other contracts to worry about, it doesn't make too much sense to really stress getting Dak done if you could potentially lose the other two in Micah and CeeDee Lamb. I said it yesterday. I said, to me, Dak would probably be the second priority on my list. Even if he wasn't a quarterback, he still wouldn't be the number one priority on my list. I think just because all the talk about the quarterback, obviously the most important position, I think that really just boosts him up on the list of priorities for the Dallas Cowboys. But regardless of that, they have a weird situation there that I think they can't afford to lose any of the other two guys, and you can't have three of the highest paid players all on your team. So they have more time there to waste, but it also sort of works out in Dak's benefit because if he really isn't too bogged down on staying with the Dallas Cowboys, I think compared to Tua and Jordan Love, he has the strongest argument to make that he deserves another contract extension just because he has those years added on. He has more of a resume out there compared to Tua and Jordan Love, who just last year produced their best year of their careers. Dak could sit back, and if the Cowboys don't extend them, he could hit free agency and still wait the longest, but still potentially make the most money because someone is going to pay him. So that works out in Dak's benefit. I think he's probably the least likely to get paid sooner rather than later. So now you look at really Tua, Jordan Love, and I guess Dak will throw in there as well, just as a comparison to see where they are in terms of how much money they could be getting. If you look at Tua to start off, he's coming off of the best year of his career, the healthiest year of his career as well. He was first in the NFL in passing yards at 4,624. He was top 5 in touchdowns at 29 and third in completion percentage in the NFL as well. And all those stats and others are among the top statistical categories in the entire AFC. So if you look at just those quarterbacks in the AFC, I want to say three three of the top five quarterbacks right now getting paid the most are in the AFC. And Tua put up a stat sheet very close to what they did. He didn't get as far as they did in the playoffs, which is comparable to Dak Prescott in a sense, but Dak is in these conversations to get a ton of money. He and Tua have pretty much, apart from Dak getting to the playoffs a lot more, but he's also been in the league a lot longer. That's the only thing Dak really has ahead of Tua, that he's been to the playoffs more often. But they really, if you just take it in this short sample size for Tua and compared to Dak's, they've almost had the same amount of playoff success. So that really doesn't bog down too much against Tua in terms of using that to leverage a higher salary for himself. And he also had an 11-6 season for the Miami Dolphins, which again isn't great, just depending on how they got there towards the end, surrendering the AFC East title to the Bills. But I think this is a great stepping point where the Dolphins got better over the offseason. If they can manage to keep Tua, I think it'll just be a pivotal piece to their team to try and build on this rather than trying to look for a new quarterback and sort of stunting that growth you've already seen with Tua, with Jalen Waddle, with Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, David A-Chain, all these guys that are really just culminating together. If you take away one of them, especially the quarterback, it could really halt that. And then in the AFC East, where you have the Jets now, the Bills are still around there, maybe not so much the Patriots, but you get the point. The AFC as a whole is just very tough. You can't take away the quarterback and then just throw this season basically away without it even starting. So that's a case for Tua. For Jordan Love, similarly to Tua, he broke out this year as the first year as the starter. He was 7th in yards in the NFL, 2nd in touchdown passes, and top 5 in a lot of statistical categories in the NFC. Made it the furthest in the playoffs compared to Tua and to Dak Prescott, so he has that going for him. Is that enough to really say that he's going to continue to perform well in the playoffs? Probably not, but that is just the latest case of what we have to go on to determine how much money Jordan Love could make. And he makes a pretty good case for himself. Like again I mentioned, in the top 5 quarterbacks getting paid so far, only Jared Goff and I think Jalen Hurts, who is the 5th highest paid right now, are the two only NFC quarterbacks. So if you look at those two guys and how they performed in the playoffs, Jordan Love made it further than Jalen Hurts, arguably with a less talented team. And then you look at Jared Goff playing with the Detroit Lions compared to what Jordan Love had to play with in the Green Bay Packers situation. A lot of young teams, not enough experience there, so that goes against Jordan Love, but he performed very well. So I think that still holds some merit there. And then you move on a little bit further to Dak Prescott, just coming off of his best year, arguably of his career. At 30 years old, he's at a great age. Really, if the Cowboys, like again I mentioned, don't sign him and he goes out and tests free agency, he's in a very good stage right now where he could get another long-term contract, and he's still only 30 years old. The window of playing is a lot longer for quarterbacks, obviously, because no one can touch them. So he could potentially find a situation with maybe the Las Vegas Raiders or the Seattle Seahawks or just another team that needs a quarterback in free agency next year. They have the money to spend it. They could go out and do that and get Dak at a pretty reasonable price. If that's the only thing they're missing, Dak will just be sitting there, and I'm sure they're going to pay whatever it is to get him on their team. And then boom, right away they're a contender. And the Dallas Cowboys almost missed out in a way because they couldn't sign him. But all that being said, do I think any of these quarterbacks are worth $55 million? I'm a big proponent of paying these quarterbacks on what I see, on the production I see out of them. So based on what I've seen so far, I would probably say no, but that's probably not going to be the case. And just looking at it now, at which team sort of benefits the most from extending their quarterbacks a little bit more. If you look at the screen now, and so I listed out some bullet points to sort of make a point for each of them, what each of these teams have to consider when trying to extend their quarterback if they feel that is the best decision for them going forward. Starting with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, they have other contracts to work out. Like I mentioned, the cap is not in an ideal spot for them. That's all that has been talked about so far this offseason. Why they couldn't sign any free agents, why it's taking so long to sign these extensions. The cap is a big problem, so signing Dak to a massive contract, then having to do it with Micah and CeeDee, doesn't add up there, doesn't make too much sense in the long term. Then the playoff success, again, I go back to that and think, have you reached the ceiling there? Maybe not with Dak, but maybe just with Dak combined with the Dallas Cowboys, if that makes sense. Maybe it's not just working out with Dak being on the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe he'll have more playoff success somewhere else, but it almost seems like this train has run its course, and pairing him up with the Dallas Cowboys even further and expecting something different might not, result in different outcomes. Then you look at Green Bay, a very young team, pretty lucky to have Jordan Love work out as well as he has so far, and you have to capitalize on this advantage, on the fact that everybody else is on a really cheap rookie deal so far, all your most important players pretty much. And if you do extend Jordan Love to a massive contract, he would really be the only massive contract that they have on their books. So that is also another advantage that they have to, take at this point, because you don't find yourself in these favorable situations often. You find yourself more often than not dealing with what Tua has to deal with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle making a lot of money. Same goes with Dak and having all these other great players on their team. Jordan Love is very fortunate, or I should say the Packers are very fortunate to be in this situation. So it's looking a little bit more likely for the Packers to extend them to benefit them in the long term. And then you get to Tua, similar in a way to, like I mentioned, Dak, and having these other players make a lot of money, and coming off of one of your best years and healthiest years. Is that enough for the Dolphins to pay you over $50 million per year to try and continue this going on? He has those health concerns with the concussions. Jalen Waddle, like I mentioned, just got a lot of money. Tyreek wants more money, more guaranteed money in his deal. And again, you don't want to break up that chemistry, but again, does that fit all into the salary cap and working it out? You don't want to mess up the chemistry. And the Dolphins, I really believe, are trending upwards. So I would want to extend Tua, but for the right price at the end of the day would be my biggest deciding factor in all of this. So to me, I think Jordan Love is probably going to be the next one to get paid. And I think it benefits the Packers the most to do it sooner than these other two, because they could still get it under $55 million. And by doing that, they figure this thing all out. They have their quarterback now on a 4-year, 5-year deal, whatever it turns out to be. And they don't have to worry about too much because everybody else, like I mentioned, is on a cheap deal. But that's what I think. Let me know who you guys think will receive another massive extension in the quarterback market, and how much do you think they will get at the end of the day. But we'll put a pin in that conversation, and we're going to move on with the rest of the show. We have more topics, like I mentioned, to get to on today's episode. Starting with, after the break, we're going to talk about Alvin Kamara and missing the last practice of mandatory minicamp. Why that is, I'll explain that. And also Cam Hayward on the final year of his contract. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for the Steelers? Are they going to extend them? I'll give you guys all the details when I return in just a few seconds.